Welcome back everyone to Formula 1 2020 Round 8 of the season, the Italian Grand Prix, the Temple of Speed, Monza. We saw it yesterday, the slipstream is massive, the drama is all over the place, up and down the field, stories to tell. Could Ferrari recover from a difficult performance from qualifying? Would it go Mercedes' way? And that fight for the podium, Sainz starting third, Perez in behind. What could the Flying Dutchman, Max Verstappen, do? As always, spoiler warning, spoilers ahead. If you've not watched the Grand Prix, I would first of all recommend you go ahead and do that and then come back and watch the race review afterwards. But before we jump into that, and just to give you a moment in case you've not seen the Grand Prix, let's take a look at your starting grid for the Italian Grand Prix. Yesterday, once again in 2020, Lewis Hamilton took pole position. Valtteri Bottas lined up alongside his teammate in P2. In behind, the Chile master himself, Carlos Sainz. Could he lead one of the spiciest midfield fights of the season, with Perez in fourth, Max Verstappen, the lead Red Bull, in fifth, Norris, Ricciardo, Stroll, Albon and Gasly, your top 10. In behind those, on the bottom half of the grid and on the alternate strategy, what damage could Danny Kvyat do from P11? Esteban Ocon, my choice for one of the biggest surprises or potential surprises of the Grand Prix. Leclerc, the lead Ferrari, 13th place for the Monegasque driver. It was then Kimi Raikkonen, P14. The two Haas cars joined each other on row 8, Magnussen 15th, Grosjean 16th, Sebastian Vettel, his final race for Ferrari at Monza, will start the race 17th, Giovinazzi 18th, and the two Williams P19 and P20. Spoiler warning out of the way, and please, if you've not seen it, at least watch the highlights. Today, we were treated to some Formula 1 magic. Here is your result for the 2020 Italian Grand Prix. And it's a first race victory for Pierre Gasly, the first French winner since 1996. Olivier Panis at Monaco, the first French winner in my lifetime, the first of his career. AlphaTauri, it's their second win in Formula 1 history, their first since Sebastian Vettel at this very circuit in 2008. A magical drive from Pierre. There was certainly things that played into his hand that we'll get through in a moment. But the craziness doesn't end there. Second place, and for the second time, technically first time in his Formula 1 career, Carlos Sainz stood on the podium, Chile himself, P2, McLaren's best result since all the way back in 2012 when Jenson Button won the Grand Prix in Brazil. And it was Lance Stroll also for the second time in his Formula 1 career rounding up the podium. It's the first time since Hungary 2012 that neither a Mercedes, Red Bull or Ferrari have been on the podium. Madness. Behind the top three, still no Mercedes, Lando Norris, P4, Valtteri Bottas, P5, really struggled today, did Valtteri. Apologies if I waffled throughout this entire thing, I thoroughly enjoyed today's Grand Prix. Behind Valtteri Bottas, P6, Daniel Ricciardo, a quiet race actually for the Renaults, everything considered, but it was certainly not a quiet race for P7, Lewis Hamilton. 8th was Esteban Ocon, 9th Danny Kvyat, and just making it into the points, Sergio Perez. P11 for the second time in his career, the second time this season, Nicholas Latifi, so close for a magical result for Williams, just able to hold off Romain Grosjean, who scores his best result of the season so far. It was then George Russell in behind Kimi Raikkonen, Kimi at one point fighting up potentially for the race victory. I still cannot believe what we have just witnessed. Alex Albon 15th, Antonio Giovinazzi 16th, and they were your finishers. Max Verstappen, Charles Leclerc, Kevin Magnussen and Sebastian Vettel all failed to do so. There's no easy way of doing our race debrief today. Sometimes we start at the back, sometimes we start at the front, but I think we got to just talk about what an incredible Grand Prix we have just witnessed. The start. How long ago was that? I found myself thinking during that red flag period, goodness me, I can't believe Sainz going around the outside of Bottas pretty much straight away before we got to turn 1. Then Norris comes in, starting from 6th, getting involved, overtaking Bottas. Hamilton leads. McLaren 2nd, McLaren 3rd, and then it was Perez who got past Bottas. Bottas was falling through the order. That felt years and years ago. And during all those scraps, we saw the Ferrari still struggling to get back through from that backpack. Vettel all the way down in 17th. We saw a bit of argy-bargy in that midfield. We then did see that yellow flag and safety car for Kevin Magnussen, the red flag for Charles Leclerc, Hamilton's penalty, Giovinazzi's penalty, and everything kicked off from there. But in the debrief now, I'll get back on track slowly. I think we'll start from the front. We'll work our way forward. And surprisingly, starting off at the front, Pierre Gasly and AlphaTauri. What a drive today from Pierre. He did get slightly lucky. First things first, before we get too carried away. Lap 1, turn 1, contact with Alex Albon. How long ago does that seem? Albon and Perez, I think it was at the time, giving him a nice little squeeze. Contact with Albon that forced Alex to skip the first chicane. Gasly kept his head down, kept on going, but wasn't really able to make any real traction on those guys ahead. Was stuck behind the 2 Renaults, was stuck behind the 2 McLarens, of course, and that big train involved with Bottas, the 2 Racing Points. And it got to a stage where it was Kvyat who was on a different strategy to Pierre Gasly. And it was Kvyat saying, guys, let me pass. So Pierre comes in early, just as there's a yellow flag for Kevin Magnussen. That helps Gasly come out in P2, technically, on the restart after Hamilton had his penalty. A mad little overtake into turn 1 and Lance Stroll on the race restart, which was brilliant that we did a standing start. Loved that from Formula 1. And the Gasman just went on from there, took about a couple of laps and built a really healthy lead of about 4 or 5 seconds. Sainz hounding him down in the closing stages, but ultimately Gasly holding on some cracking little laps at the end of the race. The gap was tight, 0.4 seconds, the gap at the end, the closest finish of the season so far. Magic from Pierre and everything he's gone through. I'm sure we'll do talks about this in the week. Everything he's gone through in the past 12 months. Well, I suppose the past 18 months, really. Since moving to Red Bull, being demoted, to get this result. I'm kind of lost for words, to be honest, guys. And I think if you follow the channel for a while, it's not very often I'm lost for words in Formula 1. And what made me even choked even more was Romain Grosjean at the end, going and give him a big hug. Everyone really coming in and giving him a big hug at the end. Leclerc, Giovinazzi was running over. Really lovely, really lovely to see. And I think even McLaren fans, with Sainz hounding him down at the end, I don't think anyone can be mad about Pierre Gasly winning. Red Bull clapping in the pit lane. Absolutely lovely scenes at the end of that Grand Prix. Danny Kvyat, P9, 2 points. Doubles his tally for the season, but a quiet race for Danny, and what's already been a difficult season for the Russian driver, with Yuki Tsunoda in F2 doing well again. Gasly's win, of course, not great from Danny Kvyat, sadly, but I suppose then he did get a little bit unlucky with the restart, and his strategy that was looking okay at the beginning obviously unravelled thanks to the red flag. The second team, and technically scoring the most points today, McLaren, 2nd and 4th for McLaren. They'll probably be a bit annoyed about the red flag. Yes, they've ended up with a 2nd place, their best result since 2012, but it could have been 2nd and 3rd. Stroll basically not doing a pit stop, able to do it through that red flag, managing to jump Lando Norris. Sainz, I said it a minute ago, great race from him, not too far away from Hamilton at the beginning. On the restart, I thought he had a good chance of getting that victory, and a couple more laps, it would have been in his hands and would have been great for the Ferrari fans, I guess, though at least it was an Italian team winning, but seeing their future driver winning, but still 2nd place. Again, a great drive from Carlos Sainz. Norris as well, another really good drive. It was a very different drive to Carlos Sainz, whereas Sainz was attacking for the majority of the Grand Prix. Norris was defending, and it wasn't as if he was defending from anyone. He was defending from Valtteri Bottas in a Mercedes. What? I mean, how Valtteri, and we might as well talk about him now. McLaren, cracking job. Amazing from them, and a huge points haul on a weekend where we thought Renault were going to be at the front of that group. Maybe even Racing Point. McLaren have smacked the competition in the Constructors, that's for sure. I can't wait to jump onto the championships in a little while. But Valtteri Bottas P5, we'll jump back to Stroll in a minute. Valtteri Bottas P5, not doing himself any favours today. What a huge opportunity to claw back Lewis Hamilton in the standings. That could have easily been a 25-point swing in favour of Valtteri Bottas. Not only that, Max Verstappen going out of the Grand Prix, even more of a chance to get in front of Max first things first. Couldn't even get past Norris at the start of the Grand Prix. Couldn't get past Perez, really struggling in the dirty air of these cars, was having to get out of the slipstream, not great. On the restart, exact same issue. Managed to pass Kimi Raikkonen, which is great, but Kimi Raikkonen is in arguably the 8th quickest car on the grid, the 3rd worst, so you'd expect him to be able to get past that. But just, where was that bit of fire from Valtteri today? We saw with Lewis coming back through the field, he had no issue picking off cars. He managed to take Alex Albon very easily. So, I'm not quite sure how to rank Valtteri's performance today. Managed to hold off Daniel Ricciardo. This should have been a race he was winning, or at least on the podium. He's not even 4th. He's P5. A difficult one. And actually Hamilton, only 2 places behind Valtteri Bottas, surprisingly enough, at the checkered flag. So, what could have been, again, a 25-point swing, ends up being, what's that, a 4-point swing? He'll be gutted with today's performance. I skipped him. We'll go back. Lance Stroll. Quiet race, in all fairness. In the first race, we shall call it, the first race of the Grand Prix, was kind of in and about, just behind the Renaults, not really able to impose himself on that front group. On the restart, he started P2. Not for the first time. He started on the front row in Monza. Made a mistake, though, at the chicane at turn 5. It managed to get going again. Managed to just hold on in front of Norris and Bottas. And once he got past Kimi Raikkonen, had a nice little gap. And what was a quiet race from Lance Stroll, we didn't really see a lot of him. Picks up his 2nd F1 podium. We've seen talks all the way through this season that he's going to be out. He's got to be out. Surely Aston Martin don't want him. Today's proof, when you see his teammate down in 10th, Perez really struggling today, actually, to impose himself in the race. Stroll, calm, consistent, 3 seconds off a race victory. Really impressive, Lance Stroll today. 6th and 8th for the 2 Renaults. It's not bad. But when you look at their pace at Belgium, when you look at everything that went on today, I probably would have expected a little bit more. Daniel Ricciardo, I mean, this is crazy that I'm about to say this, was fighting a Mercedes all Grand Prix of Bottas. Bottas couldn't pass Norris and Ricciardo couldn't really get close to Valtteri and overtake him. So that kind of hurt his race. Ocon started 12th. I thought he'd have a good Grand Prix, but his alternate strategy was compromised due to the red flag. Pretty much stayed with Ricciardo, actually, in that 2nd mini race, but Hamilton just overtook him with a few laps to go. Not a bad race from either of those 2 cars. I'll talk about Hamilton at the end. I think Checo Perez down in 10th. Big surprise there. Perez down in 10th. He was having a really good race in race 1. After the safety car, after the red flag though, some kind of issue with Max Verstappen, because both of those, after that restart, dropped way down the order. Perez 14th, Verstappen 15th, and Sergio was able to work his way through the traffic quite nicely, past Grosjean, the 2 Williams, Kimi Raikkonen. 1 point though, this is usually the kind of race we expect Perez to be excelling, to be nicking those podiums. But today it was his teammate. Not a dreadful race from Sergio, but I'm really interested to see what happened on that restart, because before that, he was brilliant. And actually afterwards, working his way back up through the field, wasn't too bad either. Williams up next. No points today, 11th and 14th. I suppose we can throw Haas in and Grosjean in the mix as well, because it was Latifi, Grosjean and Russell fighting pretty much all the way through. And Grosjean and Russell had some great fights during this Grand Prix, but we know the drill by now. They don't really have the machinery. It would have been lovely to give Claire Williams and Frank Williams a point before they leave F1. But Latifi and Russell, those messages they sent at the end to Claire, to the family, really, really nice little touch. And 11th, Latifi again, very, very good in the race. And if he can just get over those qualifying woes, points aren't too far away. This would have been the kind of race where Williams have a great opportunity to get a point. But again, machinery's not really up to standard. And when you see that they beat Alex Albon on pace, I think that gives them a little bit more kudos in the standings. Raikkonen was 13th. How was... Again, he's not in great machinery. The team took a gamble, really. Put him on the soft tyres on that race restart to try and give him great traction, really, off the start and to fight for the lead. And he did exactly that. Couldn't quite get Gasly, and Hamilton obviously came in after that restart. And for a little while there, it looked like Kimi Raikkonen may be on the podium. But as those tyres went off, the true pace of that Alpha came out, slipping back through the field, and still is on no points this season, which is very, very strange. But Kimi, to be fair to him, not bad at all today. A real Kimi Raikkonen style drive, I feel. Just when you think he might have had enough of F1, he puts in a performance like that, and fair play to him, Kimi Raikkonen. Our two final finishers that we better go through. Giovinazzi 16th. We'll talk about him actually with Hamilton, because both of their races, though they finished in very different positions, both of them unravelled at the exact same points. And if you've seen the race, you know exactly what I'm on about. But Alex Albon, 15th. Not a good one. Not a good one from Alex Albon. Not terrible yesterday in qualifying. 9th. Not ideal, but Red Bull not looking great. On the start, contact with Gasly, sent over the turn 1 chicane, loses a host of positions. Lap 2, Grosjean tries to overtake him. Now, first of all, if Grosjean's trying to overtake you and you're in a Red Bull, not the best position to be in. Anyways, Grosjean tries to overtake him. I don't think Albon quite realised Grosjean was there. Squeeze him onto the grass, bit of contact. Albon's floor ruined, completely ruined, according to Ted Kravitz. And really, the damage was done from there, really. Couldn't ever challenge any other cars in front of him. Couldn't get past Grosjean late on. Couldn't get past the Williams. Slapped with that 5-second penalty for the contact with Grosjean. A weekend to forget from Albon. And just to add fuel to the fire, Gasly winning, he needs a big turnaround in form. I think he's still just about in front of Gasly in the standings, but he needs a big result over these next few weekends. Of course, Gasly now on 2 podiums, Albon on 0. Still time, but it's certainly running out. And then the two we've not spoken about, Hamilton and Giovinazzi. Gio is home Grand Prix. Could have been the second time this season he scored points, but with that penalty, certainly no chance of it. And Lewis Hamilton, who actually, in all fairness to Lewis Hamilton, I would definitely put him in the mix for driver of the day, because the penalty that he got, the 10-second stop go for coming into the pit lane during the safety car it was at the time, wasn't it? That I don't feel that was his fault. I feel the team must have told him to come in, didn't realise, just like Alfa Romeo, that he wasn't allowed to, and Hamilton got penalised for it. Before that, in race 1, in a class of his own, while Bottas was struggling. And in race 2, considering how far behind he was for the pack, I was pretty convinced he wasn't going to be able to get points. Bottas was struggling so much to overtake those cars in front. I thought surely Hamilton would have similar issues. But no, to be fair to him, Lewis carved his way through the field and ends 7th, now equaling that record for most consecutive finishes. And also in every single one of those, he has scored points. It spiced up the championship, not a fat lot, with Bottas struggling and Verstappen out of the Grand Prix. But a nice change at the front. Hamilton, again, not a bad drive from Lewis, but will be gutted about that penalty. And a rare Mercedes mistake and a Magnussen DNF has really helped the Formula 1 world today. Your non-finishers, Max Verstappen, went backwards off the start. We don't expect that. On the restart, you kind of expect Max to be one of those drivers to really capitalise from the Mercedes mistakes. We've seen it this year already at the 70th anniversary Grand Prix, last year in Germany, in Austria. On the restart though, we mentioned it with Perez, went backwards even further, 15th. Max Verstappen, again, we're not quite sure why that happened. Ended up DNF anyway. And again, on a race where Max could have closed the gap to Hamilton, ends up being even further away and loses out to Bottas to P2 in the standings. Magnussen, not a great race at all. Before the DNF, dropped to 20th and last, dead last on the opening lap. Pitted really early. They tried something really unique. But again, nothing came to fruition. And Ferrari. Wow. I don't think that could have gone much worse. Vettel retiring with about 5 laps into the Grand Prix with brake issues, slamming into the polystyrene boards at turn 1 after a brake failure. And Charles Leclerc, after that first safety car restart, after the Magnussen incident, losing it at the Parabolica, into the tyre barriers outside. He's all well and good now, might have a bit of bruising, and was certainly winded. A huge impact, caused the red flag. Ferrari will be very grateful. AlphaTauri picked up the pieces and carried the flag for Ferrari. And also a first win for Mick Schumacher in Formula 2 will just ease the tensions a little bit. But that was a cracking Grand Prix, guys. I absolutely love that. That's what Formula 1 should be. Oh, it was just amazing. It was fantastic. We'll jump onto race rating and driver of the day in a little while. We will also have a look at Schumacher's F2 win in a moment in the F2 report. But first things first, let's check your drivers and constructors standings. Despite a calamitous race, Lewis Hamilton still leads and doesn't quite extend his lead over Valtteri Bottas, but hey, he's still doing a massive job at the top of the standings. Bottas does move in to second place after Max Verstappen fails to finish the Grand Prix. It's then Lance Stroll who moves into fourth place on countback after that podium in today's race. Lando Norris is joint on 57 points. Alex Albon drops down to 6th on 48. Charles Leclerc also doesn't score in 7th on 45. It's then today's race winner. Pierre Gasly moves up to 8th place, just 5 points behind Alex Albon. It's then Carlos Sainz 9th with that second place today, and Daniel Ricciardo also on 41 points in P10. Your bottom half, Sergio Perez, P11, despite today's Grand Prix and his great season so far. 34 points, puts you way down the order, Sergio. It's then Esteban Ocon, P12, Sebastian Vettel, no points today, of course, in P13. Despite the craziness of today, Hülkenberg still holds on in 14th place on 6 points. Danny Kvyat doubles his tally, of course, now on 4. Giovinazzi is on 2. Kevin Magnussen on 1. Latifi is 18th, Raikkonen 19th, and finally, in 2020, Romain Grosjean is back into the top 20. Russell down to P21. Your constructors has also had a bit of a shake-up, and it's not good for Ferrari fans. Mercedes extend their lead, now way over 100 points in front of Red Bull. McLaren consolidating that third place, racing point 4th. It's opened up a little bit more to Renault in 5th. Ferrari down to 6th with AlphaTauri closing in after that win today. It's then a huge 45-point gap back to Alfa Romeo. Haas on 1, Williams on 0. This is going on way longer than I thought, but it was a cracking race. Not only was it great racing in Formula 1, it was some fantastic racing in Formula 2. If you're a Ferrari fan, keep an eye on this. It's time for your Formula 2 report for the 2020 Italian Grand Prix. Despite crashing out late in qualifying, Mick Schumacher stormed through the field on the opening lap of the Italian Grand Prix feature race, and with Callum Ilott struggling to get going through the pit lane, Mick Schumacher took his first ever feature race victory. A historic event, a historic drive from Schumacher. Luca Giotto, the home hero, took second place, and Christian Lundgaard, despite not scoring at the previous 2 rounds, took a third place finish. It was then Tsunoda and Guan Yu Zhou rounding out the top 5. Callum Ilott drove a fantastic recovery drive to get back up to 6th. It would be Ticktum second on reverse grids for Sunday, and Louis Delatraz on pole. Schwartzman and Daruvula rounded out the points. And in the sprint race, Dan Ticktum, what a masterclass. His second victory of the season. Callum Ilott, another great recovery drive up to second place, and Christian Lundgaard took his second podium of the weekend. Schumacher started 8th, finished 4th, picking up more points in the standings. Delatraz couldn't quite hold on from pole position and ended up P5. Schwartzman, Daruvula, Aiken, your point finishers. And your Drivers' Championships with now just 4 rounds to go, Callum Ilott retakes the lead, 5 points in front of Mick Schumacher. Our previous championship leader, Robert Schwartzman, drops down to 3rd, and Yuki Tsunoda, despite having a great feature race, engine issues in the second sprint race, all the way down to P4, 23 points behind championship leader Ilott. Lundgaard rounds out the top 5. Guan Yu Zhou, though, isn't too far behind. Nikita Mazepin had a difficult weekend with issues himself. Ticktum is up to P7 after that great sprint race victory. Schwartzman leads the rookie standings with Yuki Tsunoda in behind in P2. Formula 2 is back next weekend for the Mugello Grand Prix, the Russian Grand Prix as well, but we'll finish off the season at the final 2 races at the Bahrain Grand Prix and the season finale at the Sakhir Oval Grand Prix. And finally, before we go, it's one of my favourite bits of the weekend, Driver of the Day and Race Rating. Yesterday, I gave my Driver of the Day to Carlos Sainz in qualifying, and he was so close to getting it in the race, and certainly Sainz gets my Driver of the weekend. My Driver of the Day has to be Pierre Gasly. That first win for a Frenchman since 1996. His first win in Formula 1. I've said it enough already today. Class act, class drive. Carlos Sainz so close again to Driver of the Day, and weekend-wise, absolutely smashed it. Race rating, I'm going to go with the big guns. 10 out of 10. 10 out of 10. For the second time in F1 eReviews history, we have witnessed a 10 out of 10 Grand Prix. We've given plenty of 9s before, but just like Germany last season, 10 out of 10 status for the 2020 Italian Grand Prix, which on a side note stings quite bad because I was supposed to go to Monza this year, which would have been incredible, but hey, if it would have been trading it for a boring Grand Prix, certainly I'm happy with today's race, and what a legendary race this was, and I will leave that there. This has been the longest race review of the season. It deserves it. I could talk about it even more, and if you want to hear more, I was live a little bit earlier. I'm actually recording this before I go live, but in your time, it would have been about an hour ago. I was with the F1 Word, talking all things live, race reaction, pure analysis of that race. So if you want to see more, head over to his channel. But as always, guys, I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. I don't think we're going to get a better race than that this season, but if we do, I'm, for one, certainly on board. Thank you all very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the race. I hope you enjoyed today's review. If you are new, feel free to subscribe. If you enjoyed today's race or enjoyed today's video, smack that like button. And hopefully, I'll see you all in the next one.